Ready to get to it? ZOOMCAST. Log in and check it out.
Boy, oh boy, we are on live. Welcome everybody to episode 27 of this humble little Zoomcast. I'm Matt Grima, and today's special guest is none other than a man who, after only 7 years in the industry, has become an associate director at Marshall White. He's $1 million fee rider last year. He hopes to do that again. I speak, of course, of one of my favourites, one of the fan favourites, down the hallways of the Stonington division of Marshall White. It's Mr. Nicholas Brooks. Brooksy, welcome to Zoomcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Matty. And as I was saying to you, very, very nervous for your viewership after this one, mate. They might be just using this to drift off to sleep at night, I think, more than anything. But here we go. You
were genuinely surprised when the call came out for me to ask you on this podcast. I can't believe you'd say that, but you were genuinely shocked when you got the call up.
Well, I thought you were taking the you know what, fairly substantially, but then you put it up online that I was doing it, and so I had to commit then. So yeah,
tell you what,
very cunning, very cunning.
From an accountability perspective, it's not bad. You want to drop a few kegs, or you want to write $1 million, maybe you just need to put it out to the universe, and you've got to commit to it. Otherwise, people will hold you to account. And of course, I'm talking about myself there, Nick. Our good friend, Brendan Allen, who's a mate of yours and a mate of mine, who did some nice things with Marshall White, episode 1 of Zoomcast, which is still available on iTunes and Spotify, by the way, Nick. But Brendan did send a little DM to me via Instagram asking me whether this episode would be titled Scraping the Barrel. So he's got stuck into you pretty early.
Yeah, well, if there's one thing that, I'll leave that one there. But Mr. Allen, he's never short of a comment.
Never short of a comment. This is live, raw, and uncut. So whatever you say, make sure you say it well, because I don't have the capability to edit or cut or swap or do any of that. We hit record and then we upload accordingly.
I've been informed you've got a team of 20 strong that do the editing and the sound mixing and all the rest. So, yeah, I don't believe that for a second.
A bit of strife, I can tell you. Well, mate, where are you? You're the first guest to hire out a suite to do your interview. Where have you gone?
You've got to help the hospitality industry. No, you know this building very well. I'll say that. It's I've snuck around. This was my office during COVID. I actually haven't been back here for a while, but Mum's got an apartment a couple of blocks away from our place, and I figured it would be one of the only places I could come without a Moana or a Frozen backdrop with my kids, mate. So I thought I'd save the listeners the pain of having to listen to Anna's Barbie go off every 10 seconds.
Well done. We're going to get to family life a little bit later on. Mate, quite seriously, you're someone who's impressed right from the get-go. I know I don't mean to embarrass you on this, but every time you and I have a chat, I laugh pretty strongly and enjoy the banter that you and I have. But, mate, most people, quite seriously, would take a longer time than what you have to be able to do some of the things you've done in such a short span. I mean, 7 years in the industry, it took you 6 to become an associate director of Marshall White. As I said, I don't want to embarrass you, but $1 million fee rider in one of the more competitive markets in Melbourne. Sure, you've got the great brand of Marshall White behind you, but your competition is no joke. Your clientele is no joke. The team that you're working, which we'll talk about a little bit later on as well, is clearly no joke. I want to talk about your rise and progression through the ranks. Before we get there, though, a young bloke out of Barooga, which I reckon is sitting north of the Murray, and you tell me there's about 1,800 people in that,
right.
in that little town.
There's around 900 when I left the great township of Barooga. I actually had a little bit of a jarring reminder today that I've just tipped over. I've been living in Melbourne longer than I lived in Barooga, which was a little painful to actually realise.
Wow.
I've got a footy reunion coming up that sort of triggered that it was probably, the balance had shifted. So, I still get called out occasionally when I say I'm going home for the weekend, and Hannah goes, "It's still home, is it?" So, that's where I grew up on southern New South Wales, sort of one of the border towns, Cobram Barooga, up near sort of Yarrawonga and Echuca. But great times up there on the river.
How long were you there before you transitioned to Melbourne? Did you do school and that sort of thing up there?
I did, yeah. I was at school. We went to Shepparton for school every day on the bus there, which was a bit of an arduous trip on that bus. I think it was a certain amount of hours each way and back for what should be a 45-minute trip, but stopping every way and picking up farm kids along the way until we got there, but we didn't know any better, so we absolutely loved it. I sat next to my best. It was funny. One of my best mates was born in the hospital next to me a couple of days after me. We sat on the bus next to each other all the way to school and back every day, and then we went to college next to one another. And then when we both graduated, we ended up working in buildings next to one another. So yeah, it was hard to get rid of me, I suppose, but yeah.
And what in terms of family life, mum, dad, siblings, how did all that look for you?
I had all of them. Yeah,
Cool.
A pretty big family up there. Dad was one of 10, and his father was, I think, one of 8 as well. But yeah, we actually just had one of the uncle's birthdays up on there on the weekend, so it was really great to just get back and see them all. It used to be a little bit dangerous once you turned 18 and you've got 10 aunties and uncles on one side to want to have a beer with you, and mum's one of 6, so it didn't stop there at Christmases and Easters. So yeah, it was great growing up there. I had a pretty much of a dream run growing up there, fishing and skiing and all that sort of thing on the farm. And they're still up there, so I get back there. Funny, my siblings live on the 2 farms next door to mum and dad, so,
wow.
So yeah, great to go back and catch up with everyone.
Nice one. And how do you make the move from Baruga to Melbourne?
Gradually. It was what was it, finished year 10 and then went up to boarding school at Assumption College, which is where dad and grandpa and those sort of people, those sort of family, the uncles all went as well. But it was never really the plan. It was sort of by accident I ended up going down to boarding school. I won't bore you with the story too much, but it sort of was a prank gone wrong one summer, and then ended up having to follow through with the cover story that meant I was saying I was missing my older brother who was going to move to Melbourne Uni that year for college, and so to mask the fact that we nicked a work car for the weekend and driven it to Canberra. And we said, we just did it because we're going to miss one another. And so mum, being very proactive and fantastic kid that she is, said, it might be a good idea for you to do boarding school so you can stay close. And then I said to Steve, how long do we drag this on? And turns out 2 years of boarding school was about how far we dragged it on. So yeah, that was how I ended up at Assumption.
What were you like at school, mate? I get the impression you'd be a relatively good student.
I was pretty studious. Yeah, it's like everyone. You're sort of trying to work out what your strengths and weaknesses are. I was no good at the sciences. I was quite good at the maths and the English and the literature and those sort of things. But yeah, I quite enjoyed school. I loved it. I had this conversation with my wife Hannah quite a bit. She just shudders at the thought of high school. I loved the boarding school aspect. I loved school in general. But I just said, it's fantastic years. I loved recess, going out and seeing people from different age groups and that sort of thing. I just thought it was brilliant. It was sort of one of my favourite times of my life, and the boarding house especially, just exceptionally tight. And those boys, there's not many things we didn't know about. The 30 blokes that we lived with, sort of inside and out, and it's sort of same today, and it's still exactly the same. So that's always very entertaining.
You're comfortable in uncomfortable situations, by the sounds of it, Brooksy.
Yeah. You've sort of seen everything after living with 29-year-old adolescent boys. So, it's good. It was good.
It says I've done an enormous amount of research coming into this, as you could probably imagine, including reading your marshallwhite.com.au profile. It says that you completed your MBA and then you worked in financing commodity markets for over a decade as a trader and analyst before seamlessly making the transition into real estate. Mate, that's pretty serious stuff.
Might have to address the seamlessly in terms of the transition into real estate. I don't think anyone steps into it seamlessly.
They take a bit of license with the copywriting of our profiles, just in case anybody hasn't realised.
That they do, yeah. No, when I finished up uni, I think I'll say I got into stockbroking, the finance side of things. So I thought that was, it was a really interesting time. It was sort of about 2003, I think I came out of uni, and obviously the time I worked there, I managed to get the GFC in there, which was, I don't know, a historic time to be working in those industries. I still remember waking up and reaching over to your phone and checking Bloomberg and, okay, today's going to be a nightmare. There's just going to be blood on the street. And it was a pretty wild time as well. There was the people I worked with, I say forever thankful. It was just forever colourful. It was a fairly wild bunch that we worked with. And I still, coming out of uni at 21 or something like that, some of the things you saw was pretty wild. So I really enjoyed it. It was 2008. You saw a lot of people that just did not want to keep going in the industry leave, and therefore there was an abundance of clients available, and I kept working for a fair few years beyond that. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Met some people from all walks.
How old were you when you first got into stockbroking?
21.
Wow.
21. Yeah.
Wow. And did it for 10 years?
No, I did it for about, I think it was about 8 years.
Okay.
And then because of the GFC, I mean, educational providers weren't getting all the corporate applications that they normally get because everyone was pulling the purse strings in, and I on a wing just sort of threw in an application. I was doing an MBA domestically, and I got no shortage of help from those close to me that know this story. But I was doing a Melbourne Australian-based uni. I was doing MBA with a couple of good mates, and then just on a wing, I threw out a application to do my final semester at Columbia University in New York, and
as you do,
and I still remember it was coming in before going to the races one day, and I just checked my emails while I was at the office. I had to get a tie or something from the office, and I checked it, and it said you'd been accepted into Columbia next year. And I remember, I mean, never. Number of times I've jumped up and down on the spot with excitement. It was just so exciting because it was just, you know, really exciting sort of thing to have on the horizon, moving to New York, and obviously Hen came with me and having that time there.
Yeah. What was it?
The hell I do get is that I say it was a Columbia MBA when it was most definitely not. It was finishing off a few little bits and pieces there.
Yeah, little portion of it, but you can elongate the truth. Was that something you always aspired to do, to sort of study abroad or travel and sort of combine your love for travel and business at the same time?
Not so much. It was more I just wanted to add another string to the bow, I suppose, with the MBA. I mean, depends. If you're doing something that you can apply it to immediately and it's immediately applicable, then I think that would have been excellent.
Yeah.
But very much like what we do, mate. It's stockbroking was your self-generation. It was, you know, you go out and find your clients. You decide if you want to market yourself. You decide. Like it's very much you're not managing scores of people, or you are, but I'm certainly not. It's not like you've got organizational charts to be really applying some of the information and the knowledge and the education that you're getting out of the classes directly into it. So it was more it's a string to the bow that may separate you in the future if you do decide to do something else. And it was more just one of those things. It's never going to hurt to have done it. And then when the possibility came up to do the last year or so overseas, New York was a pretty amazing spot to land.
So talk to me about that. So you're doing your MBA, you're working in New York at the time?
I wasn't. No. It was a student visa, and as far as anyone's concerned, you're not allowed to work in that capacity. So no, it was study, full-time study there. So knocked that over. It's not a great city to try and not be distracted in New York, but it was a lot of fun.
Being 6'6" and 225 pounds of raw muscle with that Australian Baruga slang, they might have looked at you and raised a few eyebrows, I reckon.
You've added a few inches in both directions there, mate. But thank you. Yeah.
Quite seriously though, did you stand out like a sore thumb?
No. They come in all shapes and sizes over in the States, as you know, mate. I will applaud a ruckman who can, you know, run and take a bounce. They've got, you know, NBA players that are 4 inches taller and can do everything. So, no, it was funny. I got to the gym over there at Columbia, and was in there fairly regularly. And I had the Hawthorn jumper on when I was in there training one day. And one of the guys came over. He played from Texas. And he said, "Oh, I did a semester in Australia." He goes, "You play football?" So, yeah. He goes, "Rugby or football?" So AFL. But you can kick. Yeah, I can kick. He goes, "I'm captain of the rugby team," and come down to training, you know, Tuesday and Wednesday and all that sort of thing. And I'd played footy at Melbourne Uni at college there. So it was great just to go. It was amazing how similar it was. The same ridiculous childish jokes that you have at footy training in Baruga. Yeah. You were having at these Ivy League grounds around where we played and those sort of things. So, but they were a little heartbroken when they asked me to do I'm not a good rugby man, mate. I was really just filling in a spot there, but they asked me to put a kick, you know, over to the boundary. I said, "Yeah, no worries, you know, just drop kick and drop punt and hit it perfectly, you know, out to the boundary." He goes, "Mate, you've got to drop kick it." So, well, we are starting from scratch then. So, yeah, it was a bit of a skill set to learn again, but it was great to be in a team environment again.
Stockbroking, MBA, Columbia University. How the hell do you make your way into our little industry called real estate?
Um, I dare say 90% do. They fall
Yeah.
backwards into it. No, I was what's the best way to describe it? I was a bit of a property pervert. I used to love on a Saturday, tick off a couple of opens, go and have a look, and it was more just a curiosity for me. Even when I was in New York, I'd go to the opens there just because you want to see a loft in Soho, fantastic. You want to see 5-floor walk up in the East Village, yep, fantastic. And it was always just that little bit of curiosity, a little bit to do with the properties themselves, the different styles and how they're presented and pitched to you, but also just that human interaction of how some of the agents would deal with people when they came through and what they'd be trying to tell you and all of those sort of things. I don't know what it was, but it got to the point where Hannah said to me, she goes, you're doing this every Saturday morning. What are you doing? You might as well go and get paid for it.
Wow.
And that probably planted a bit of a seed and ended up pursuing it a little further. So
yep. And first only company in real estate, Marshall White, is that right?
Yeah, I was a little bit meticulous when I decided I was going to. I actually remember it was name drop. Tommy Lonigan's Bucks party. He was at Assumption College with me, and in the boarding house there, and became really good mates with Tommy. And it was his Bucks party, and it was a couple of the local boys from Yarrawonga. One of them was a year below us. I never told him this, but I said, look, I'm toying with the idea. I wouldn't mind. I've done my real estate license. I just don't know. I can't see myself making that transition. And he just said, just do it. If you want to do it. But he said, if you do it, make sure you burn the boats. And this is, philosophical at 7 p.m. on a Bucks party. So, you can imagine the amount of nonsense that's being spoken. But he just said, if you're going to do it, just burn the boats and go all in. Don't sort of put one foot in and I might want to do this, I might want to do that. And so it sort of stayed with me. I couldn't get it out of my head that he kept saying, like, well, just do it. And so I ended up doing a lot of research on the different agencies, the different areas, because I'm from the country. I didn't have you grew up in Hawthorn, you grew up in, Brighton or anything like that. So I genuinely looked at all of them. Brighton was one I considered pretty heavily. Obviously, I live in Port Phillip, Albert Park, so I did look around that. I used to harass the life out of poor old Justin Hollard and Nick Hu back in the day. He was going to opens there, and I think they would have just written as soon as I left, this bloke's a waste of time, because I was at the time, generally.
Yeah.
In fact, I should check the notes to see what Hollard had written down.
Yeah, he's a serious note taker, Hollard, so you might have to have a look. So generally didn't have a connection at Marshall White, didn't know anybody, just walked in and said.
As any iota of research did, I'd come across Marcus and his work, but nothing. I did go to a couple of opens there, and he was always, his affable self and extremely helpful and happy to help. Anything I can do, let me know. And I reckon similar notes were probably jotted down by my name, given it was, the price tag on the property probably precluded me from it. But then I sort of started circling that I really like the way Marshall White went about things, and without making it a full advert for the company, mate, I did just really like their approach. Everyone seemed to have that really, let me know if I can help, and they weren't pushy, they weren't rude. So I quite liked that company, and then it was just working out the area, and I worked out that Stonington probably had a bit of appeal. It had a little bit of everything, a bit of the development, a lot of the heritage stuff that I love. And so that sort of started to narrow it down a little bit, and then it probably would have been, just as I'm in that decision-making mode, I was at a function and ran into Justin Long, and because I'd been stalking, profiles at Stonington Marshall White, I got chatting with Longy, and I think it was a couple of pints at the Orong later, and then it was in the boardroom meeting with, I think it was Bonge and Andrew and might have been, and Justin as well. So it all happened pretty quick.
Do you remember your first 6 months, 12 months in real estate? How you felt going to your desk? How you felt picking up the phone and cold calling someone? How you felt being given a management and trying to figure it all out? Remember that?
Yep, I remember. God, I remember the amount of things that Longy would have had to pick me up on. He was and you know how detailed Justin is, but in terms of, look, Nick, this is what we need. We don't need this. We do need that. You need to call through this list. This is the point you want to get across. he was fantastic with the X's and O's with me for that. I can't thank him enough on that. And I think I bear hug him every Christmas party and tell him that. But the more so, and I've apologised to Mark Harris, who unfortunately got laboured with a couple of managements with me early, where I was really finding my feet, and he probably had to do the bulk of the heavy lifting. But it was just that you've just got to learn the ins and outs of it all and learn the craft. One thing I do remember in that first 6 months is the amount of trained martial arts. It's pretty renowned, the amount of training you are expected to be doing. But I was just so thankful that you could sit down for an hour on Friday with it, whether it was a Dan or a Tosti or Dwayne and Stewie used to do the Friday morning ones as well. And I just found that I've still got my notes for that, and I'll revisit it every now and then. But it was just, I sort of had that feeling like when you start, you are the worst agent in the industry. So you have to build from there and get better. Now, there's some that might work into the negative in our industry, mate. So maybe you're not the worst, but I was starting at neutral. So I had that I just had to get better, and I wanted to get better quick. So that training was brilliant. I loved it. And I still to this day think the training's so valuable. If you can get better at negotiating for your clients, if you can get better at getting the outcome, and you're better at your options and better at everything, I think 1% you can get better at it. It's brilliant to have, which is obviously pretty handy and a big part of your role.
Yeah, 100%. Your self-awareness, particularly in the formative years of your real estate career, I think is incredibly important. And you say it there, and you speak with so much humility. But it's true. Recognizing where you're at in terms of a current assessment of yourself, and then looking at your capability and how you can best serve clients and your teammates and all that sort of stuff. It all sort of goes into the pot on your journey, doesn't it?
100%. Yeah, I think self-awareness at times was maybe even a restraint for me, where I was just so aware that, hey, you don't know the right answers sometimes. If someone asks you what's the best approach for my property, like this is serious. This is people's assets, those sort of things. Yeah. And so I would sometimes defer or ask for help or bring someone else in. And it's only when you get to a point where you've done the runs, you've put the hours in, you've hit that mark where, hey, I know what the best advice is for here. I've seen it play out, or I've handled enough of the situations where you're a little bit more confident to know, okay, the advice I'm giving them is sound, it's proven, and it's by nature a bit conservative. But you do see the people that don't have that self-awareness. We had, I remember there was one agent that came in on day one, Lindsay Fox, trying to bring the biggest houses he could find, Paul Little, all those sort of things. And, didn't last too long in the company, but just didn't have the self-awareness that maybe, my first month at the company, those aren't the calls I want to make. But yeah, I do think it's important to have it, but not let it restrain you too much in the early days.
Yeah, got it. Well, was there a moment, Brooksy, where for me, I can say pretty comfortably that it took me a long time, being a kid from the West, not having a contact in this part of the world, not knowing a street or an area, to genuinely believe in front of a client that I was the right person to represent them and their property. And rightly or wrongly, I had the real estate nous from a previous life as an agent elsewhere, but hand on my heart, I found it really difficult to believe that I was the right person for that client for a long period of time. It took me a while to get some confidence. Do you remember a specific moment or a deal or a property where you started to look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, I belong at the top level?
Whether it's at the top level or not, but a time that I definitely do remember. It's funny when you're saying that. I always treated every training as an opportunity to put another tool in your toolbox. So as in, I think a lot of people in our industry just go through with, well, I've got a 13-inch ring spanner and let's apply that to everything and see how it goes. I think every time you work with someone different, every time you work with a different client, every time you work, you train with someone else and learn, you're just taking different tools from them. Madeline Kennedy, I was fortunate enough to do a lot of work with early, and was just, I wish I had another 5-10 years with her. I mean, she certainly doesn't, but I loved working with Maddie, and she was pretty meticulous on the training, same as Longy, just the X and O's in terms of, hey, Nick, we're doing this and this is why we're doing it.
Right.
But it got to a point where it was, I used to sit there, like, had my Bloomberg screen set up, 3 screens, and if I was going to make it, I'd just be paralyzed to make a call to someone because I'd come across as, I wanted it to be the perfect call. Every call had to be perfect. So I'd research sales in the street, how long they've owned it, any notes, what the homes they've been to. Let's dial. Okay, it's 1 call an hour you might get out at that rate.
Yep.
But I just wanted to make sure that I was getting, the right cadence and everything right for it. And that's just not a way to do it. So you sort of eventually learn that, you don't have to have that, or your own market knowledge improves to the point where you don't need to have the references because you're aware of the sales sort of intuitively. But I remember being out for coffee with someone who works in the industry. He does a bit of the financing side of things, and he had someone stop at the table and ask me, "Oh, you work much white?" "Yep." "Hey, my dad's got this house, Interact. What would it be worth?" "It's on X size block." And it was then I just cited 3 sales off the cuff, told him, the differences by way of orientation, the size, and then it was something innocuous like, your dad's recently rendered the front of his from memory last time I drove past. And he went, "Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the one." And it was, you should come around and see him. And it was like, it ended up getting signed up, and it was just a little bit of I didn't have that security blanket there, but thankfully you'd done the work to know your market well enough. And it was sort of one of those, okay, I can do this. I didn't tits it up too badly, but it is one of those things that you never know until you're jumping and find out whether the parachute's going to be there of the work you've done.
It sounded like you gained some pretty quick credibility in their eyes to be able to reference some of those sales and even know the property that they were speaking about in your mind.
Yeah, well, I think I should never just assume they're the same person, but I think it was either Stewie or Dwayne that did give the advice that, and it was very, it's a fine line when you start out in the industry that you don't want to come across as green, as a bit new.
Yep.
And I think whichever one it was just said that as long as you're demonstrating sound market knowledge, they're never going to ask you about your experience, how long you've been at Marshall White, how many properties you've sold, or anything like that.
Yep.
If you can demonstrate a working knowledge of the industry and your advice sounds like a sane person and it is accurate, there's no reason for them to question, well, hang on, have you done this 7 years or 7 weeks? What's going on here? So that I was always pretty hard on myself to have that market knowledge, which until you organically start to develop it, you sort of do have to work on it.
I reckon I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. I'm sure every person that listens to this at some stage of their career, the perfect phone call.
Now, mate. They've well and truly drifted off to sleep to this. These stories.
Hopefully they're still with us, available on iTunes and Spotify.
Let us know when we're starting, mate, and we can get going.
No, quite seriously, that call reluctance because of you wanting to make the perfect phone call hinders your ability to put in the volume needed to uncover some of the gold that's clearly out there in the marketplace based on the amount of properties that turn over in each municipality on a yearly basis. Do you remember, was it that moment that then pushed you through to say, hey, volume needs to trump the perfect call? And you don't want to sound like a dill, and you don't want to be quick on the phone and not show empathy when it's needed or not show respect when it's required. But the difference between perfect versus volume?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that was just not that sort of necessarily interaction, but that around that time, it was a pretty important change for me that, yes, volume needed to go up, but also authenticity trumps a robotic person on the phone telling you every sale in the street. If you get on the phone and you can be authentic with someone, and sometimes, I mean, you tell me 1 in 20, 1 in 10, you get told to go jump.
Yep.
So that's fine. You're going to expect that. That's never been something that flattened me out at all. That's okay. On to the next. That's fine. But I do think it's as long as you're presenting as authentic. Hey, how you doing? Whatever you're going to say. But as long as it's you, if you're trying to do a carbon copy, for example, I work with Marcus. If I try and do a carbon copy of Marcus and his cadence and how he talks and all of that sort of thing, it will always be a cheap knockoff, and it'll never be authentic because different experiences, different people, different results. But just that it really did sort of highlight to me that being authentic is going to trump any amount of copycatting you're going to be able to do. And that in itself made volume easier for me.
Yeah.
Easier in able to handle campaigns, in able to handle prospecting, those sort of things, because you didn't have to front anything, or days where you're a bit tired and you don't want to put this facade on. You're always going to retreat back to your true self. And if your true self's who you've been putting forward, that doesn't matter if you're having a tired day or a sick day or anything like that. You're still going to be able to get on there and present as who you are, as opposed to sort of mock something up.
Yep. Well said. Well said. So you transition out of Justin Long's team. You go straight to Marcus Chiminello's team. You're working with the great Marcus, Mandy Stanley, Matt Stewart, Jack Nicol. I haven't missed anyone there, have I?
Well, the transition wasn't exactly that. It was for a while there, I was sort of a foot in each camp with Longy and Chimmer.
Yeah.
It was just more on Saturdays I was filling in, helping out with Chimmer's stuff. And then that melon-headed friend of yours, Brendan, was helping him out on a couple, and it got to the point where we started doing a fair bit together.
Yep.
And it was the plan that we'd start to sort of do a team within a team in Chimmer's team. And then, full Julius Caesar style, I just knifed him and sent him back to Euroa. No. He obviously, when he had the bub on the way, moved back to Euroa, and that was that. But I do joke about Brendan and that sort of thing, but he was incredible when I started. It was just, how he's excellent in terms of dealing with buyers, dealing with sellers. Never say it to his face, and please edit this out if need be. But he was so patient with me. His temperament was so good in terms of, this is how we need to do it. This is how we need to bring this expressive interest to a conclusion, which now we do 70% of sales. What we do is expressive interest. And Brendan was hands down most instrumental in teaching me how that was done.
Yep.
And it's funny, I think he's a fair few years below me age-wise, but it was weird how we sort of came together. He went to the same boarding house that I went to.
Yeah.
We had a lot of the same stories, both country, both played footy, both, that sort of thing, and moved to Melbourne. It was probably the last person I would expect to meet, obviously working the Chirac market with Marshall White, is to get this bloke came down. And the first time he realised that I went to Assumption, he came in, I think he was singing the school footy song, and I just went, how does this bloke know this song, But I bonded with him pretty quickly, and so we ended up trying to do a fair bit of work together.
Yeah.
But yeah, little does he know, he was actually exceptionally helpful to me as well.
I can't edit it out. So if he's listening, that's some nice feedback. Mate, let's talk about the current climate at the moment. I know we work in different parts of the market and different parts of the world, but largely similar, I would have thought. So low inventory levels for sure. There's just far less for sale. My understanding of the top end of the market, unless you tell me otherwise, though, is it's still incredibly strong.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you say that, you sort of point to something you haven't sold for
Right.
3 months. And so, but I think that'll humble you pretty quick as well. But we do still see some incredible properties hitting the market. This is what Mark put on today, yesterday. Phenomenal property there on Albany Road, and the interest it's been having already before it hit the market is, at that price point, still just eye-watering. His efforts last year, breaking the Victorian record, breaking it again, 76 and 80, or, it's just that's the stuff that makes the headline. There's always going to be the stuff in the middle it always just comes down to price. If it's priced, at a level the market's going to digest. I'm one of the opinion, and this is dangerously getting into stereotypical agent chat, of the opinion that the market is starting to grow a bit of a spine and starting to bounce back.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the inventory side of things. So I do think the risk is that you go out too strong at the moment and you can get forgotten.
Yeah.
But if it's priced appropriately and people see value, they'll come and have a look and make a decision based on that.
I think I know where you're going to go with this from your authenticity chat that you had earlier, but
you're setting me up there.
No. Well, you say it however you want, but I think in a market that's got low inventory levels, you've got some really good operators and really good estate agents. Sometimes it can be quite competitive to actually have the opportunity to represent that client and list that piece of real estate. And sometimes when a market turns, we know that there are agents that will go out there and will start to talk really high prices, start to be really, really competitive, sometimes to their detriment when it comes to marketing investment that the client might make to attract the largest audience they can. They might look at some really sharp fees just to try and make themselves look more attractive on paper. These common objections from agent to agent in the competitive world that we work in have never changed in 13 or 14 years that I've been doing it. But how do you combat some of that stuff while still being true to yourself and giving the client the right advice?
I think had this discussion a few times. We work in one of the only industries where if there's agents out there that tell someone inflated figure to win the business, their punishment can sometimes be a $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 fee for their either inaccurate market knowledge or deliberate misleading of the client. It's the only industry I know where you can get, paid so handsomely to be so incorrect or misleading. I think that's a real shame that it goes on, but a lot of the time you get the clients you deserve. If you go out and I want to do it for the bare bottom, find out what the staff rate is, I want to do it for half of that sort of thing, then you're probably going to have a client that's you're going to sort of go through some pain with them and that sort of thing. If it's a client that's going to listen to great advice about the method and how best to market it, you don't want to, like you say, it's not a small amount that people are spending on marketing, so you don't want to try and oversaturate it. But if they listen to the advice that, hey, these are probably our advice on how best to capitalize it, how best to expose it to the market that's most likely to be your buying pool, those are the results that we've had that are the best. And I think, Marcus, it was just a sold sticker does more prospecting than 100 phone calls is going to, and he's certainly got enough up to know. But yeah, it is just, you'd rather be that authentic self. The ones that do go out and mislead, I think will get a reputation for that pretty quickly, and they do, and they have, and they've just got to hope that there's a deep enough new batch of vendors coming into the market to not have heard the tales. But I mean, that's not something that was here before I got in the industry, and I, as much as I'd love to, I don't think that's being stamped out anytime soon.
No. Do you think, Brooksy, that in the world that we live in, with so much public knowledge and information available to consumers, that it becomes harder for us as agents to differentiate ourselves from the competition? So when you're sitting in a lounge room, and I can't express how good some of the other agents at other agencies are. No, I don't want to pump them up too much, of course, because we're going to back our own in. But the reality is they're really, really good operators. They're skilled negotiators, been in the game a long time, got some really well-established relationships in deeper parts of the market. How do you go about differentiating you as a human being and your real estate nous versus some people that have been in the industry potentially longer?
Yeah, I think that's probably the battle most agents have, and it's that long-standing rapport that you build over years and years and years and years. And there's the, you know yourself when you walk in, and suddenly you have a great rapport with someone. It strikes up so quickly. You might have been you only met them because they came through an open, but you just had that great rapport with them. And I think the quickest way to build that is to be authentic and to be educated and convey that on to the owners that, hey, yep, I think we get along. I think I've got the best strategy to get you sold, and to get you sold for as much as possible. You're not going to be a sausage put into the sausage factory and we all do it like this, and you're going to have to be optioned at 2 because I've already got one at 1, 2, 3, and 4. Like you've just got to be able to build that trust, but then it's also to be able to deliver on it. And like you say, there's some good agents out there that can pitch really well, and really lack the flow through to actually get the sold stickers up, or to get the result that owners want. And I mean, we're all trying to get better at it. But I mean, if you can do what you say, and there's enough people obviously in our markets to sing your praises on that, I think that's the differentiation. If I've been into one where you know that their neighbour or good friend has given you a good pump up because they had a great result with you, you're starting on third base. Basically, you basically just don't have to kick the cat, and you're a chance to list that house. Going with the right advice, going with the appropriate marketing and the fees and all of those sort of things. but there's others where you're coming from a long way back, where you know someone's got a stronger relationship in there, and some people's response to differentiate are different. So I before I got into the industry, I thought agents put a lot of emphasis on how much they can differentiate themselves, when to a lot of vendors were just sort of blurry faces in suits or dresses or heels or whatever it's going to be.
Yep. Yeah. What's the biggest source of listings for Nick Brooks now versus Nick Brooks day one, week one of real estate?
Referrals. It's it's funny that the amount of colleagues, friends, ex-mates I played footy with, yep. Those sort of things that will send referrals in. And I understand why they weren't doing it week one and of day one of when I got into real estate. But now the confidence that they have that, hey, I'll tell mum and dad to call Nick. He sold 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the area over the last 2 years. They know him already. They're going to be confident with him. So that level of referrals has now sort of surpassed 50, 60% of my business, which I'm eternally thankful for. But it is, it comes with, whenever you're selling for friends or family and that sort of thing, it comes with that added responsibility. We have to deliver on this. Markets are sometimes out of your control, but the strategy has to be delivered on. So, that's probably been the biggest change in that time frame.
When you're getting as much referral business as you are, which is an extraordinary amount, by the way, and you should be pretty proud of yourself, how do you protect yourself from becoming complacent to doing the old school things that you were doing day one, week one?
Great question. Like I said, this sort of goes back to what we're saying a little bit earlier about that authenticity. You've just got to, do what's real to you, I suppose. I really enjoy making calls. I get upset when it gets interrupted. You ask our team, which I get no shortage of help from. I've got the aeroplane headphones with the Madonna mic, and when I pull those out, I know I've either sold out of the pipeline, and I know these things are like Qantas level, like they are the pilot sort of ones. But they know I've either exercised the pipeline and I need to stock up, or I just need to hit the phones and hit your database and those sort of things. But it doesn't stop the idiots in my team from taking relentless hell out of me, Matty.
If you're an agent listening to this, Brooks, and you're not carrying a lot of stock, what are the first couple of things you do? Is it as simple as get on the bloody phone and call people?
I as everyone did over the last 3 years, but I had a couple of days where whatever COVID was for everyone when we were back in the office, but a couple of things went wrong, whether it was settlement was delayed or there was a legal issue between whatever it was, those sort of things that they pop up. They're part and parcel with the industry. But 4 or 5 land on the one day or the 1 week, and I was just it was just getting to you, and it was just there was some good advice. It was just dial your way out of it. No point turning a bad day into a really shitty day. Dial your way out of it. Get those first 10 done. Get it to 20, 30. Out of that, you're going to have 3, 4 appraisals, 4 people. Well, my sister actually is looking for something. Have you got anything? Yeah, I actually do. It's really the results are ultimately on you. The savior complex, or waiting for someone to come and save you, drop a couple of listings on your lap, and I hope, geez, the company call-ins, they'd send a few my way, go and have a whinge to the matter. I don't see it as being a sustainable way to. And you decide how much you market yourself. You decide how long you're on Instagram, and you decide how many calls you're going to make when you get to the office in a day. I find it the great rejuvenator of my mood, of your business, obviously, but and also just of information. You start with, well, they actually bought this one off market. Oh, what did that one sell for? Okay, let a couple of neighbours know. Okay, maybe they're thinking of doing the same. So it is the great rejuvenator, and it's I've found it almost therapeutic that if you miss a bit of business, or you're a bit flat about something, just hitting the phones and dialing your way out of drama is probably the best way to do it. I feel, but yeah.
What a great takeaway. Dial your way out of it. It's like a boxer in the corner. If it's getting wild on, punch back, have a crack, and who knows, you might land 1 or 2 and you can turn the fight your way. It's a really, really nice analogy, and one that I think a lot of people can relate to. Hey, mate, it's probably bath time. Your kids have got spaghetti all over their face, but quite seriously, your wife, and I've got you out of that, by the way, so you can thank me. But
you have, mate. You're in the bad books. So not my fault.
Hannah, your wife's an absolute beauty, incredibly nice person. Had the pleasure of meeting her once or twice. You've got Matilda, you've got Banjo, 2 kids under the age of
Under the age of 5.
under the age of 5.
5.
So you got a busy life and a busy household off field, mate. How do you get? And this is a question I ask a lot of people, and I don't expect you to know it because nobody has. But how do you get that balance right between being, super dad and making sure you're aware of what the hell Frozen and Elsa is, but also, sitting in front of the big hitters of the world in Turak and surrounds and doing what you need to do to earn a crust?
I've probably got the balance right now, managing my 2. My management of time's probably about to go out the window, and that we've just found out we've got number 3 coming out.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Is that a ZOOMCAST exclusive?
Well, yeah, there's a few family members I haven't got around to telling yet, so I'm sure they'll find out through here, mate. But that's exciting. I certainly not strong planning on my end. We're just about to finish renovation on the house, which I figure it's going to be cheaper to buy bunk beds than do another reno. So got number 3 coming.
Wow.
But yeah, no, that balance, mate, like you say, it is always hard, but it's just I said Albert Park, I'm over there. You've got a little bit the same, of 15, 20, 30-minute drive home, whatever it's going to be on the night. But I've found that to be a great switch for me. I get the calls I need to get done on there. And Hannah will probably laugh hysterically when I say this. I can come in and be a little bit more switched straight over into dad mode.
Yep.
So yeah, I love that. And same on a Saturday, I get to a point where, once business is done for the day and there's not any deals lingering around, until Monday morning, I switch on pretty hard to dad mode. So I'm comically out on a Saturday or a Saturday night or a Sunday with the kids. If there's anything, ferry, jumping castle, food festival, anything I can find, the go boats along the Yarra, anything I can find to keep them entertained. I enjoy it. I can said a couple of times, how do you have the energy to even bother with that? But I find it the great rejuvenator for me, that you spend a bit of time with them and get them laughing and carrying on and giggling, and it sort of recharges me for the week.
Yeah. Do they? I don't have kids, Brooksy. Do they get you going? Do they keep you motivated in terms of when you do steer off course, or you get distracted, or you get a bit shitty about a deal that doesn't go your way? Do they bring you back?
I remember my first ARIC audibly giving an eye roll when someone was talking about their why and why it was so important to have a why. Basically, it was an homage to their kids, which, not having children at the time, it was like, what is, come on, you've got to have a better reason. A couple of, kids in nappies to get up in them, but they're great for that sort of thing, and you understand why you're doing it, and I thoroughly enjoy it. I'm a bit of a introvert by way of I'm not sort of typically surrounded by people all the time and that sort of thing. I do like to be a bit of downtime, but spending time with them is just something that it does big shot in the arm for me. So it gets me happy and excited. Not to say they don't run you down, and I'm going to be having a couple of 3 a.m.ers coming up when the new one arrives. But ultimately, coming from a big family, I love it. So yeah.
You offer a bit of mentorship and guidance to some of the younger agents that are coming through the ranks. Ben Bolgiorno is one of the greats that I do a lot of work with, and he catches up with you religiously, I think, on a Monday morning out at Armidale. Do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy giving back to some younger people or people without the sort of industry experience you've got?
No, he's a pain in the ass, and the quicker we can wrap it up would be that's fantastic. I love it. I hope he gets a bit out of it, because I love chatting with him. But he's a great bloke, and he's making incredible strides in the industry for being in such a short time. But I enjoy it. It's you do sort of flash back to your days there, and you want to give a little bit of a guardrail here and there. But Marcus is one of the greatest examples of this. He gives the job. He doesn't give a task by task micromanagement of anything like that. And I can only tell Ben, look, this is how I approach these issues. You decide what you want to do ultimately, but he's sensational, Benny, with that sort of thing. So, I enjoy it. It's great. It's great to see their progress. And I think he signed up some $10, $11, $12 million properties. So that's better than my 12 months in real estate.
Okay, well, he's broken a few of the rules at Team 1, but anyway, it is what it is. We can't stop a man from listing and selling real estate. My God.
That's not my guidance, mate.
No, I've slipped a little bit there as a leader, but anyway. Mate, this is going to be available iTunes, Spotify. You spoke about Maddie Kennedy. I reckon she was episode 13. You got the great James Tosterman on there with a couple of episodes of the great Marcus Kiminello. There's Matt Pelios. There is oodles and oodles and oodles, hours upon hours of some nice content with this humble little Zoomcast that started during COVID. So go back through the library, have a listen. Mate, is there anything else you want to add?
No, mate, I think you do a great job with this. I thoroughly enjoy them whenever I get a chance. So I do apologise to anyone that had to sit through this one and listen to me mumble on. But mate, thank you very much for the invitation. I do appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Look, I am going to try and commit to these a little bit more. I've got my next guest lined up in a fortnight's time, so I'm going to try.
Not Reese Witherspoon.
What? Who's that? Sorry,
Reese Witherspoon.
Not quite Reese Witherspoon. Going to be an Eric though, which we do know, and Caitlin Jenner is going to pop up on the screen as well. The Legends of Real Estate panel I saw, Tosterman and Chiminello, going to be a part of it. Mate, it's only a year or two before the great Nick Brooks wanders on stage and gives them some wisdom. But
I got the pleasure of carrying Tim's bag this year, so big task for everyone up there.
I'll definitely see you up there. We'll have a bit of fun.
Excellent.
Good stuff. Thanks for jumping on.
Thanks,
Cheers, mate.